just a little bit of a reflection. I am a little bit older, and I see half the crowd is not as old as me, and thank you for that, for the young people that are here. But going back to the old days when we had the radio stations and there'd be these callers, the last caller would come on, and the guy would say, you have 30 seconds, present your information in 30 seconds. And the guy would speak for 2 minutes. And so here we are up today giving you a lot of information about some very important things that are happening. And I'm given a wonderful 20 minutes, and I'm very appreciative of that time. But just like a lot of the other presenters, we're giving all of this information to you in a big fire hose. So I would like to first off give a raise of hands, because we've done a lot of that today to kind of wake you up and get you away from your cell phones a little bit. So how many of you know where Eastern Washington is? How many of you from Eastern Washington? Hey, there's a few of you. I mean, the rest of you from Western Washington. So today I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour to the lower right corner of our state. Does anybody know where Pasco is? Hey, not bad. How about Lewiston, Idaho? Yeah, all right. Doing all right. So Pasco happens to be that dot there near that little black dot on the lower right-hand side next to Ice Harbor Dam. On the right-hand side is Clarkston, which is the partner city on the Washington side. And since I'm from the Washington State Department of Transportation, I have to give you Clarkston, Washington, right, rather than Lewiston, Idaho. But there's a dam on the right-hand side, which is the Lower Granite Dam. There's 4 dams on that river system that go through the Lower Snake River, and the Lower Snake River connects into the Columbia River at Pasco, Washington. That river carries products inside and into and out of Eastern Washington. So you might ask, why am I here from the Department of Transportation speaking to you about dams? Well, I'm actually not speaking to you about dams. And that's one of the things that we as a Department of Transportation, we're neutral on whether or not the dams stay or go. And you might have heard there's a lot of interest in removing those dams for the benefit of salmon and other native species that use the river system. And we at the Department of Transportation are aware of that. But the question that we have been asked, and our legislature has asked us to look at this, is what happens if those dams go out from a transportation standpoint? There's been plenty of studies that have been done that indicate the benefits or the drawbacks of removing the dams. But one of the studies the last study that was been done regarding moving the dams from a transportation standpoint was 1999. Lots changed in the transportation infrastructure since 1999. So the legislature asked us to look at that again, because if those dams go out, we need to be prepared for that from an infrastructure standpoint, because it's amazing how much goods and services get moved into and out of Eastern Washington. So that's what I'm here. That's what they hired me to do, was to lead that study. We were given $5 million, $4 million of that. We hired Jacobs Engineering to conduct the study for us. And our study began back in about 1 year ago, and we got the consultant on board about 6 months ago. And now they're working on this product, and then we have to have our final study out by the December of 2026. The study's got 4 phases to it. Our current phase that we're into right now is just simply understanding how goods and services move into and out of that area where nobody knows anything about. That's called Eastern Washington. How goods and services move into and out of Eastern Washington, that's what we're here to figure out, and that's what we're doing in phase 1 of the study. Phase 2 and phase 3 is what everybody wants, because everybody wants to, when you start talking about this problem that we are facing, wants to jump to the solutions. We're not there yet. So my presentation today, and if I come back next year, we might be starting to talk about solutions, but my presentation today is going to be talking about what moves into and out of Eastern Washington and how does that stuff move. That's understanding the needs. So there is one product, obviously, that uses the river. It's barges. Barges go up the Columbia River all the way up to the Tri-Cities, and then they turn right and go up the Snake River. It's navigable all the way from the ocean all the way to Lewiston, Idaho. Of course, they change different types of ships. There's the ships that get all the way to Lewiston, Idaho are not ocean going. They're more like a tugboat, barge, and the ships then go all the way down to the Columbia River at the mouth of it in the Portland area, Vancouver area, and Kalama. Then they move over to other ocean-going vessels. There's about 20 ports that are along the Snake River system. They go all the way from Lewiston, and Idaho is very proud of the fact, or Lewiston, Idaho specifically, is very proud of the fact that they are the only port for the state of Idaho, and the easternmost port in all of that Snake River system. These ports carry a variety of products, primarily grain, but they carry some wood, they carry fertilizer, and oil does go down to the Pasco area. If you zoom in on the Lewiston area, there's also a blue dot means that they can actually take cruise lines. So if you ever wanted, you can do it for about 6 months of the year. They run cruises that go all the way up the Columbia River and in through the Snake River. It's about a 7-day cruise. It's actually become very popular, and a lot of people are doing that. And right now, that blue dot sits in Clarkston, and they're going to be moving that blue dot and building a new port facility for those cruise lines to end up on the Lewiston side in Idaho. So it's going to be a brand new facility they're building over there. So that is even one aspect of the Snake River that is being used for transportation for a recreational side of things. Now, just a real quick side note, I'm doing the study on the transportation network. There are 2 other studies that I'm aware of, and there's probably more, but there's 2 other studies. One is on recreation and one's on irrigation. Those 2 are going to be addressing some things that I don't address. Like, for example, the cruise lines. I will not be addressing cruise lines in my study because it's basically, there will be a large impact to them. They will not be going up the river if the cruises are not there, and that's more of a recreational side of things. So the cruise industry is going to be addressed with the recreational side of things. I will not be addressing that. If we go down to the other end, at the mouth of the Snake River, there is the Pasco area, and the Burbank is just across the river, right where Highway 12 cuts across. There's a series of 5 ports right there at that location. You'll see there's one of those ports that is blue, that's steel, where we would take some steel product out for recycling purposes. There's 2 of those ports were kind of like an off purple color. That's crude. That's oil products. So one of the things we've been told by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is all of those ports will be operational if the dams are breached. So in our study, we're not going to be addressing these ports in this area here because we assume that they're all going to be operational. If at some time we're told in the future during the course of our study that they have to be taken out of service, then we'll adjust our study and accommodate that. There's a lot of very interesting things that happen that I'm learning with the movements of goods and services. The petroleum that comes this way, if you get like ethanol over here on the west side, all of our fuels have ethanol in them, right? Where does that come from? It comes from the Midwest, and it comes through Pasco. And it comes down by barge, a lot of it, some of it by rail, but down by barge or rail going down to the people on here on the west side, on the Seattle-Portland area. All these products move out. The primary ones, as I said, grain's number 1. About 90% of the product that moves down the river, 80-90% of the product that moves down the river is grain. Forest products comes out of the central Idaho area, and there's a lot of fertilizer that goes up the river to get to those products to fertilize them. And then, of course, there's a thing called high, wide, and heavy. That's windmills and other odd-shaped structures which can't go by highway, or for which it's better to move them by barge. The wheat product over the course of the last 20 years has slightly gone up, and this is 7 counties from eastern Washington. You'll note that there's no central Idaho or northeastern Oregon products in here. There's a lot of products that come from central Idaho, especially wheat that come down the river. We are a Washington State study, so I'm just focusing on the Washington States here, Washington State counties. We do, in our model, though, take into account those other producing counties that are outside of our state because we need to understand how the product comes to the river and then eventually moves down it. But you can see that the grain has increased over the last 20 years. Fertilizer and how much goes down the river from fertilizer has varied quite a lot over the course of time. Recently, it's been peaking a little bit, but there has been some significant drops in it in the 2010 to the 2012 time frame, but generally gone up. Wood products has gone up and down over the course of the life of the data that we have. There's been a peak back 15 years ago or something like that. At one point, they actually did take lumber from the Dalles, Oregon, and run it upriver to the mills in central Idaho. They don't do that currently. Most of the product that comes down by wood is chip or whole log. Whole log exports, or they don't go export out of our country, but they go down to cedar logs go down to a place near Kalama that gets turned into fence boards. The bulk transport, last time that they used the bulk transport, it's infrequent and it's something that we can't model very well because it's when the market needs it, they can provide it. But what we did have, the last thing that's been moved by bulk transport is windmills. There's a big, large 320-foot long blades that were pulled all the way up the Columbia River to the Snake River into Lewiston and then taken all the way to Canada. So that river does produce or does move products that we can't take simply on the highway system. These products come in irregularly, so we have a really hard time modeling them, but we will take into consideration how some of that product might be able to get through the system if this is no longer available. Obviously, rail is a big part of the picture. And I apologize for the small picture here, but I want you to focus on a couple of the big lines. They're the blue and the red ones. Those are your what are called Class 1 rail lines. Those are your Burlington Northerns or Union Pacifics, okay? The blue so happens to be Burlington Northern, the red happens to be Union Pacific. Those are the main Class 1 railroads. And as if everybody been in my business for a long time, you realize that they have changed how they do rail now. And it used to be that you could pick up a car and go someplace and get that car eventually to the export markets. Burlington Northern and UP don't like to do business like that. They like to move to unit trains where the whole train is a specific grain product or a specific wood product or something like that. They like to pick it up like that and move it. It's a lot more efficient for that. The rest of the system that you see around it are what are called short line railroads, Class 3 in our state. And the brown lines specifically which are kind of hidden a little bit and small, are owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation. We own them, but we don't operate them. This is kind of like our highway system. We own our highway system, but we don't really operate it as far as the actual cars that go on it. We have several operators that run on our highways, on our rail system that we lease, and a lot of it is in that area, which is the wheat area, which we're pulling, which we might be impacted if the dams are removed. What we're looking at right now is whether or not a lot of that rail line is at capacity. And there are some of these lines that are getting closer to capacity, but nothing right now I would say is at effectively rail line capacity. You notice there's a line down at the bottom, which is the Hermiston to Portland line, which is the Union Pacific. It runs on the south side of the Columbia River. That line has a TBD on it on the capacity. That's because that is the area which we're actually having to partner with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to go outside of our state to work with the state of Oregon to find out the capacity of those lines. So when we just got into a partnership with the Corps of Engineers about a month ago. We're bringing them on board, and we're going to be working with them to get that data. Some of what determines the data, the capacity of a rail line is whether or not it's single track or double track. A lot of the track inside of all of Eastern Oregon, including the stuff that goes down the Columbia River, is mainly single track. There's only one line that has a lot of double track in it, and that is the Burlington Northern line that runs from Spokane down to the Tri-Cities. It's got some purple on that line. That purple indicates that it's double tracked. Double tracking a line obviously increases greatly the capacity of that line. A lot of everything that we own, the Department of Transportation, is all single track. And you can see in the lower right-hand corner, we had a problem with that single track. About a month and a half ago, a trestle caught on fire because it's old. I was out there in the field with some rail people a couple months ago, saw a stamp on our rail. The rail was 1909, was the year it was manufactured. So a lot of our trestles in that area are wood trestles, and when something happens with the fire, they can catch on fire and they can be lost. So the line that we have goes from Colfax down to Pullman, and then a little bit up from Pullman is out of service as a result of that. Roads. Well, I'm from the highway department. I can speak to roads pretty well. But what I can tell you really simply is that all roads around the vicinity of the grain terminals in eastern Washington, from a capacity standpoint, specifically I said around the grain terminals, okay? I didn't speak to other locations which might be in the Tri-Cities. But around the grain terminals, they all are below capacity. Our study has not yet done the physical analysis of the roadways, like pavement conditions and bridge capacities. We will get into that to determine that in the future once we know where trucks are going to be diverting to. Truck traffic or traffic in general in Eastern Washington is different than what you see in Western Washington. In Western Washington, generically, we're pretty high on our volumes, depending upon it doesn't really matter which time of the year you're talking about, because a lot of the traffic we have on this side of the mountains are still commute-related trips. In Eastern Washington, it's different. There's a lot more of a peak in the summertime, a lot more recreational trips. This is combined cars and trucks. Note how the general shape of the graph is. Now I'm going to take you to just trucks. You notice how the truck graph is just shoved to the right. So what we experience for those Eastern Washington people that are from there, we do know that there's a harvest season. When the harvest season happens, you see a lot more trucks on the road. That is generically true. So we see some peaks in September and October when a lot of that product starts getting moved out of Eastern Washington and through Eastern Washington. This is basically showing you that the weekday trips in Eastern Washington are not the same style of weekday trips you see in Western Washington. Western Washington, you want to go to Seattle, you do it on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday morning, it's the best time, right? It's a flip-flop of that in Eastern Washington, where Fridays where there are your peak times for both passenger cars and for trucks, but weekends for trucks are much less, but there's still a lot of weekend traffic for passenger cars. We're building a huge total logistics cost model. This model covers central Idaho, all of Eastern Washington, and northeastern Oregon. It is large in the scale of what we're doing. Each one of those blocks there is down to the township. So we have that large model, which is being fed in with a lot of 174 grain elevators with capacities. So we need to know all that because we need to know how that wheat product goes from the township all the way through the network, all the way to the export ports. These next few slides are probably going to cause you to cross your eyes because this is just simply how a product can get from a country elevator, which sits near the farms, all the way to the export market on the right-hand side. There's a plethora of options that it can take in the transportation system. We have to model that. That's country elevators. If you expand that to rail locations and barge locations, that options of how we get products into and out of Eastern Washington gets amazing. That turns into products which are maps which are like this. This is a map of just grain going into and out of Eastern Washington. You can see there's green lines, which are the roads, going to the purplish lines, which are rail, and then some of those green lines, which are on the southern portion, which connect to the river system, they go to the blue lines, which are the river system. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens with this chart, which we're trying to fix, is the river basically is too thick of a line and the railroad lines go right next to it. So a lot of the product is, if you're able to zoom in closely to the Columbia River system, you'd see there's two rail lines, one on the north and one on the south of the Columbia River, and the river is right in the middle. That is where it all comes through, and that river is taking a lot of product out of Eastern Washington to the export market down in the Portland vicinity. This is zooming in just on the actual close in the Snake River area, and you can see all those green lines getting to the blue lines and getting to the red or purple lines. No product comes from Eastern Washington and goes all the way to the export market by truck. It all goes by long haul, rail, or barge. Similarly, this is the grand scale of our fertilizer model. Fertilizer model similarly turns into something like this, which shows a little snaking diagram that goes back to the river where they get their product, and then it goes back out to the farms. The wood product one probably is the simplest. It goes from Lewiston, Clarkston area, and goes down the river to the Portland into the Kalama area. That's as simple as it is. In our engagement, we're doing things like this, venues like this, where I'm going around and giving a bunch of talks to try to get the word out about what this study is, what it does, and we want to have your input on it. We want you to know about it. We have an open house that's coming online November 15th to December 6th. We want to have you read up on this. We want you to be informed about it. We want you to have an understanding of what's taking place for our study. Our first product we're going to be producing of this study is a concurrent conditions report, which is coming out December 15th. I have the draft of it in my hands right now, but we want you to look at that report when it comes out in December, and it'll kind of talk about basically summarizing in more detail what I just presented to you today. I want to remind you that we have a 4-phase study. We're just simply in phase 1 of that study right now. So we're just trying to simply understand the needs. We do have the phase 2 and phase 3, which are going to be pretty busy, where we're going to be thinking about what the solutions are to this problem that we have. We have a grand scale problem, and we are going to be spending a lot of time looking at it and trying to come up with transportation solutions to try to address those grand scale problems. I'll leave you with this, my contact information. If you so happen to go to that QR code, that takes you directly to our webpage, for which you can get all of this information, and you can get even more. And that's where the current conditions report will be posted when it is done in December. I thank you for your time, and Ken, I specifically thank you for the opportunity to be here.